Hello, my name is Thomson, and today I'm going to show you how to shoot long exposure hyperlapses, just like this. A hyperlapse is a form of time-lapse photography where the position of the camera moves between each exposure, producing a nice seamless tracking shot. It's actually fairly easy to do, but really hard to make look good. I'm using my trusty Canon 6D with my Tamron 24-70mm 2.8. If I want a nice crisp hyperlapse, I can actually shoot handheld. If my camera's set up to 1/100, f8, ISO 100 for instance, I can use the guidelines built into my camera to frame up my shot, take a picture, move one pace, take a picture, move one pace, take a picture. When I stitch those all together and add a bit of post-production stabilisation, I'll get a nice seamless tracking shot. When it comes to considering your frame, I recommend shooting a nice wide-angle landscape with nothing in the foreground. Also consider your move. What's your start point and what's your end point going to be? And make sure you're going to have no complications before you actually start shooting. When shooting long exposures, it does become a little bit more tricky. You will absolutely need a tripod. I've got the Manfrotto 501 fluid head here with me. In my scene here at lovely Media City, Manchester, I want the water to blend together ever so slightly. I want the clouds to blur. If there are any people in my frame or any cars, I want them to streak across the scene. Now, in order to do that in daylight, I absolutely have to use an ND filter, or an ND fader, or variable ND, whatever you want to call it. Because I know if I set my exposure time to 2 seconds, even at f22, ISO 100, my image is going to be overexposed. This is my ND fader. It's just 2 pieces of glass that rotate over each other, which stop down light from, say, 1 to about 10 stops of light. I stick this on the front of my camera, spin the ND filter until I get the correct exposure. Once I've framed up my shot, I hit my shutter button. Now this is why I have to use my intervalometer, because at a 2-second exposure, as soon as I hit my shutter button, I'll add a bit of camera shake, which will produce an unsharp image. So instead, I like to use my intervalometer here, set my interval to about 12 seconds. So when I hit start, the remote will automatically fire the camera. I then have 10 seconds to pick up my camera, move my tripod, reframe up, and leave it. I don't ever have to touch the shutter button again because the remote will do it for me. When considering your move, you could use a bit of chalk on the floor and evenly mark out distances so when you move your tripod you know it's going to be exact. I simply like to use my shoe because I know it's a consistent size, so I typically pick up my tripod and move it a shoe length or half a shoe length depending on how many shots I want to take.
I then bring all my shots into Adobe Lightroom 5 for a bit of editing. Now I don't have to do this, I can actually skip this step completely and go straight into my editing software, but as I shot in RAW, I know I can push my images that a little bit further without any loss in quality. Now this shot here is a little bit grey, a little bit dingy, so I'm just going to push it here using my settings on the right hand side and see what I can get. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring my highlights right the way down. I'm going to bring my shadows right the way up. I'll do a white point by holding Alt. Just a little bit of white creeps through, so we'll just push it to about there. Do a black point, so we're going to bring the blacks right the way down. This adds a bit more contrast to the image just until a black smudge comes through. Try about there. Add a little bit more clarity. Just kind of sharpens the image a little bit. Add a bit more vibrance to bring that colour out. About there. And we look a little bit overexposed, so I'm just going to bring the exposure down ever so slightly. And you can also change the white balance or you can change your framing, whatever you want to do. And that is it. To check the before and after, I can hit the backslash button. Before, after, before, after. Actually see them side by side. So as you can see, the after is much more pleasing. The next thing I need to do is sync all the photos. So I press Command A, select all, hit sync, make sure all my boxes are ticked, and hit synchronize, and this will update every single one of these photos beneath here. Once my photos have all updated and are all synced together, I can then go File, Export. I want to be exporting these as a Jpeg. I've actually reduced my file size down to 5 megapixels, 300 dpi to save on a bit of hard drive space. Pick the folder you want the images to go into, and you can change the name to Media City. Done. And then click Export. Then you want to open Adobe After Effects, click New Composition. I'll call this Media City Hyperlapse. Click OK. And you import your footage. If I go Media City, click the top one, make sure JPEG sequence is selected and click Open. I can then simply drag and drop my frames on. I will zoom out a little bit. As you can see, the images are quite large. I've done that on purpose just so I can adjust my framing to my actual personal taste. And also when I do any post-production stabilisation, we'll zoom in on the image ever so slightly and there'll be no loss in quality. So I'm just going to show you what the hyperlapse looks like without any stabilisation done. So I'll go up here, hit RAM preview. So this is what my hyperlapse looks like without any stabilisation done. As you can see, it's quite jittery, but generally pretty good. Sadly, this stupid sun keeps going in and out, so I might actually start from a little bit further on so that that doesn't affect our hyperlapse, about here. So I'm now going to go over to my effects and presets, hit Warp Stabiliser, drag and drop that on. Warp Stabiliser is now going to analyse all the information in the shot just in the background, and in a couple of minutes it'll have stabilised our shot. Warp Stabiliser usually does a phenomenal job. If this isn't the case, however, or you own an older version of After Effects without the new plugin, then you'll have to stabilise manually. I'm just going to show you how to do that. Just hide Warp Stabiliser for now. Go over to your tracker here, and you can click Stabilize Motion. Make sure position's ticked and rotation, so you get 2 tracking points. You then drag these tracking points over to a feature that's common throughout the entire sequence. So I'll pick up here. I want them to be quite far away from each other. Make that a little bit smaller. I'm just going to go pick the corner over here. Once I'm happy with that, I'd simply click Analyze Forward. It's a little bit of a slower process, and you might have to pause the video and move your tracking points manually, but it does the same thing. Once that's all done, you then click Apply. Okay. Once your sequence is nice and smooth and you're happy with it, simply go Composition, Add to Render Queue, rename to whatever you want to name it to, and save. Click Render.
I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learned something new. My name's Thomson. See you soon.